Okay, today we're talking with guitarist Ethon Brosh. How you doing today, Ethon?
I'm doing great, Jason.
Okay, and I understand that you're from Boston, Massachusetts. Is that correct?
Yes, I am. I grew up in Israel, but I've been in Boston for about 12 years now. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're originally from Israel. Do you mind me asking what part of Israel you're from?
Near Tel Aviv, about 20-25 minutes away from Tel Aviv.
And so let's talk a little bit about how old were you again when you came from Israel to the United States, and you mind talking a little bit what that experience was like for you?
Well, the reason why I moved to America was because I've always been inspired by American rock music or British rock music.
Yeah.
Iron Maiden's always been my favorite band. But yeah, in general, just like that, Eddie Van Halen guitar sound that everyone knows and loves. Basically, that's what always inspired me, and I've always wanted to pursue my dreams of being a rock and roll musician. And later on, I saw the opportunity to possibly go into Berkeley. That's here in Boston, and that worked out. It worked out very well, so I moved here, and I love it here, and that's why I stayed.
And talk a little bit about your experience at Berkeley. I mean, how many years did you go there? And 'cause I know a lot of professional musicians, go there to get their start. So, did you hook up with any musicians there, or did you go just for the love of music?
At the time, I don't know. I guess I looked at Berkeley as an opportunity to move to the United States and have something to do, and actually go to college and also learn music and meet other musicians. So it was a perfect fit in many ways. And of course, while I was there, I hooked up with a lot of great musicians. I mean, all the teachers are amazing musicians, and most of the students are too. So Berkeley is like a bubble where everyone's a musician. So you're just like eat, breathe, and live music 24/7, and it's a beautiful thing. So now these days I go back there in the summer, and I teach there in the summer. And every time I go back there and teach, it's just I go back to that frame of mind of just music 24/7, and it inspires you to really pick up the instrument and learn new things and really explore and share music with other people. And that's something that during the year when I'm dealing with other stuff and just like a lot of gigs and the band and just the music business in general, it's hard for me to focus on really on the instrument and the reason why I'm doing this in the first place. But yeah, whenever I'm in Berkeley, it's such an inspiring environment to just explore music, and that's a beautiful thing.
And let me ask, how did you get your opportunity to teach? I know you started out as a student, you were saying, but did somebody from the school administration offer you a teaching position, and one of your instructors, were they impressed with your playing so much that they thought you should teach others?
I guess at some point that happened. Yeah, I did graduate Berkeley. I went there I did it in 3 years. It's a 4-year program, but I just never took a break. And I did it in 3 years, and I guess 2 years later, I went back there, and I knew most of the teachers, most of the guitar teachers, and the heads of the departments there. And and at some point, I just started teaching there, and I guess I did something right.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I know a lot of guitar players like yourself, earn extra money like teaching others. Is that the first time you've ever given guitar lessons to other people and actually given instruction, or have you ever given like private lessons to people?
Oh, I've given private lessons to people for a long time, and I still do. So it's nothing new, and I think that most guitar players do that. sometimes when you're not teaching, you do things, I guess, by instinct. And it's nice when you teach, you actually get to understand a little bit more of what you're actually doing, and hopefully at the end, like, you'll actually be getting better by understanding what you're doing.
And let me ask you, like in teaching people, I was curious, is there much of difference to you in going to somebody's house, having them come over to your house and giving a private one-on-one instruction versus teaching them in a classroom?
I used to only teach private lessons, and then once I started teaching at Berkeley, I started doing group lessons, and I thought that it wasn't going to be something very valuable, but at the end, I thought that, I think nowadays that it's actually, I like teaching that way better, because it's you have class participation, you get a bunch of people just like joking and throwing ideas and jamming, and it's just like it's a much more inspiring way of learning. So I like that, and then when you have a bunch of people, you can really talk a lot about practical live playing and not just showing someone scales and et cetera, et cetera. You can jam and you can do all kinds of things and brainstorm, and I think it's a nice way of teaching. But that's for players who are a little bit more advanced.
Okay.
And I wouldn't just do group lessons. Obviously you have to do the private lessons and everything else.
Okay, wow, that's quite impressive. And and I was curious, like, if any of your students ever come to see you perform live, outside, your own personal shows that you put on.
Oh yeah, it happens, all the time.
Okay, now Ethon, I'd like to talk a little more about your career as a guitar player, of course. And I gotta be honest, until Chip sent me the press. The press release about you, I'd never really heard about you, but when I got on the web and I checked out what he sent me, and I was pretty impressed with what I heard. And oddly enough, before I knew you were on tour Inkfei, I immediately heard kind of like an Inkfei and as well as a Richie Blackmore influence in your playing. Are either of those guys really an influence on you?
Richie Blackmore, not so much. Not that I don't think he's a great player. I just I never really gotten into his music so much. He's a huge influence on he's always been a huge influence on my playing. He's absolutely one of my top favorite guitar players, and I think at what he does, he's the absolute best. Like, no one can top him at what he does. However, there are a lot of people who are trying to top Yngwie at what he does, and I don't know why they even try. He's really the best at what he does, and no one can touch him. So, knowing that, I'm just like, I'm not even trying. I'm just sticking to my own thing. And yeah, he's a huge influence, so here and there you might hear me borrowing a couple of things from him, but, I try to have a different approach.
I mean, it's not so much that you're ripping the guy off. I think it's just maybe your influence coming out, and that's not really a bad thing in itself. And like I said, I think this tour you're on is really for people that are into guitar type of music. This is a dream come true, and I think Yngwie does his style. I mean, you got your style, so I think people are going to go to the show again. Two completely great guitar players, for their money.
Well, thank you. I mean, it seems like the reaction is like what you're describing. I going into it, I really didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if I'd have a bunch of guitar players in the audience just with their arms crossed and just like looking at me like, well, when is Yngwie gonna come along, But so far, the crowds have been really, really good and very supportive. And I think that people notice that
And so
Yeah.
so let me ask, how did you actually get on the tour? Was it a matter of just his people reaching out to you, or did you have the same booking agent, or what's the deal?
It's basically I have a great manager, and one day he just called me up, and I guess he knows some of the people that Ingrid works with, and that's how it came about. So
Okay, that's great. And
yeah, he just called me up, and ever since he called me, pretty much my whole life turned upside down because there was so much stuff to figure out for this tour, and it's not like I had a year to prepare for it or 6 months or something. It was like less than 2 months, and I had to figure everything out.
and I understand right now it's for like 25 dates, but is there any talk of maybe since the shows are going so well of extending that?
I don't know because this is Inva's tour.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm not sure exactly what their plans are. But hey, you never know what the future holds. I mean, 2 months ago, I didn't even know about this. So,
Yeah, wow. And so you guys of course are on the tour together, but I was curious if you actually got a chance to meet him or the guys in his band, and what's your impression been of him?
I've only really met Inva one time on this tour. I mean, I come across him every day, but yeah, I talked to him one time, and it was nice to me. It was nice to me. And the other band members, I hang out with them all the time. And
Okay.
I know the drummer Patrick for a while, and he's a friend. And I met the other two guys on this tour, and they're both great guys, the bass player and keyboard player, and they both sing on this tour. And yeah, so we're having fun out there.
So now again, like I say, Ethan, until Chip sent me information about you, I never really heard of you before. But of course, I got online and I listened to your, some of your music that he sent me to check out, and I was really impressed. But so, first thing I want to ask you is this your first album you've released, or do you have a couple others that you've already released?
I'm not sure which album you listened to.
Well, I think I heard a couple of tracks from the I think upcoming album, and then there was a video he sent me of you and George Lynch.
Yeah. So yeah, that video is of a tune called Downward Spiral, and that's from my first album, Out of Oblivion, which is on Magna Carta Records.
Okay.
It's a record label that's owned by Mike Varney. And that was released back in 2009. And now I'm about to release my second album, which is called Live the Dream. And I'm not sure when and where it's going to be released, but I have some pre-release copies, and it's pretty much like a tour exclusive.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, because I'd heard
on this tour.
that's what I had heard that it wasn't currently available, but people who come out to the shows, they can get a copy. So so you are trying to get it released like on a label, but in the meantime you're just selling to the shows. That's correct?
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening at the moment.
And so you're no longer with Mike Varney's label. Is that correct?
No, I'm no longer with them.
Oh, okay. Well, so I imagine you've been having to print up the CDs. Is that how it's been working?
I'm sorry?
So currently, like you're having to print up all the CDs yourself. Is that correct?
Yeah, for the time being, yes. And I pretty much ran out of stock the other night, so I think I'm just left with 5 copies of the new CD, and I'm just talking to manufacturers right now to make more of them. So I think there's going to be a couple of shows that I'm just not going to have any of the new CD, and I'm trying to get some new stock for some of the California shows.
Wow. Okay. And now that's pretty impressive. A guy like yourself. You're out there making money, and at the same time putting it right back into printing up CDs. And you could make you had the option of making your fans wait till you got it on a label. But I think it's pretty cool. Like you said, right now it's a tour exclusive, so the people want to hear your music bad enough, and they'll go check you out live, and then they'll have opportunity to get that. I think that's a great way of doing it.
Exactly, because I am playing most of the new material. So, it doesn't make sense to play that material and just and not even have something that presents it. And, Out of Oblivion was just such a long time ago that, I have to move on.
And can people still buy Out of Oblivion, or is that out of print,
It's not out of print. It's Magna Carta is still
selling it.
Still selling it. It's still out there, and I have copies that are from the label, and I do have them on sale for this tour too.
Okay, and and listening to what I've heard of of your stuff, I got to say that good music is good music, and I think being on this kind of tour of it, you'll get more exposure, and that's obviously the idea. But I think you remind me like a lot of the '80s style guitar players. I want to ask, why do you think there's so few guitar heroes these days like there was back then?
I don't know. I mean, I'm so depressed with the state of the music business nowadays. I think that a lot of things have contributed to bringing it to the shape that it's in today. It's just the downloads have ruined the part of the business, and the bad economy didn't really help. And the fact that music nowadays is not very good anymore. What can I say? I mean, the '80s was a huge party, and everything you had to just top the next guy and just come up with something bigger and better. And it just changed. I guess after a while, it just people just didn't want to bother anymore.
Because on an up note, I gotta say that's kind of a refreshing thing about listening to a guy like you. It kind of takes me back to those days, and not necessarily saying that you sound like every other one of those guitar shredders out there, but it's kind of refreshing to hear a guy just play stuff from his heart and not necessarily worry about trying to sound like everybody else. And that's why I think.
Thank you. Because that's the thing. There are a lot of people that still like that style of music, but they're not getting it from anyone. Those labels are not supporting the style anymore, and they're just going with whatever. And this is one of the things that I'm trying to achieve. There are a lot of people that want this kind of music, and the challenge is that just to get it out to them. And this is part of the reason why I'm on this tour with Ingrid Malmsteen. I'm trying to get to these people who are looking for this type of music, and they just don't know where it is. So that's the idea.
Yeah, that's great. And let me ask you. So, are you endorsed by anybody? You got any exclusive endorsement deals right now?
Yeah. The main endorsement that, especially for this tour, is a company called ISP Technologies. And they make great guitar products, great amplifiers and speaker cabinets and pedals and stuff like that. It's called ISP Technologies, and they make an amplifier called the Theta. And I have the preamp version of it, the rack preamp, and now for this tour, I'm pretty much the first person to play the new Theta pedal that I don't even know if it's out there yet, but I'm testing it on this tour, and this thing sounds killer. So I think that it's like the perfect distortion pedal. It's not just a distortion pedal, it's really like distortion. It's a preamp. It's a preamp that you put on the floor, but it sounds so good that I think that every guitar player should give it a shot.
Wow. So let me ask you now, when people come see you live, are you like a one-man band, or do you got an actual,
oh no,
band?
I got a full-blown band. I would never go on stage with like an iPod or whatever. I mean, maybe for a clinic type setting, but I'll never go on stage, especially on a tour like this, going on stage before Ingrid and just doing it by myself. That won't make
Yeah,
I
yeah.
have a great band. I have a drummer called John Anthony from here in Massachusetts. A great drummer. Now, I have a good friend of mine from Berkeley who came from Italy to do this tour. His name is Giorgio Mangelli. And then playing second guitar, I got my little sister, Neely Brosh, who's
Wow.
also a solo artist herself. And she's playing with me on this tour. So, yeah.
And so, of course, it's your band. But I'm curious, having your sister in the band. Do you guys like try to, like, is it like kind of like dueling guitars, or I imagine you're doing most of the leads?
Yeah, there's some of that because some of those songs have harmonies and all kinds of parts. So yeah, there's a little bit of that action going on for sure.
Okay, and so I'm curious. You're strictly like instrumental music. Your music doesn't have any vocals, correct?
Well, with this band, with the Ethon Brosh band, it's purely instrumental. But then I have another band called Burning Heat.
Okay.
And Burning Heat will be playing the second half of the Malmsteen tour. So basically on May 11th, I believe in Fresno, California, Burning Heat's going to take over.
Wow. Okay, that's cool. So people are actually getting to see both sides of what you do.
Exactly. Yeah, I felt like, I have two original bands, and I love both of them equally, and, I believe that both of them deserve the exposure, so I'm just curious to see what the reaction to Burning Heat would be.
And does Burning Heat have an album out currently, or are you guys working on a new one?
We're just going to be releasing an EP, so again, it's one of those things where it's not released yet, but we're going to have it on tour. So it's a 5-song EP, and these are songs that we've been playing locally for quite a while, so we're comfortable with them, and I'm looking forward to see how people react to that.
So I got to ask, like, on the Malmsteen tour, have you hit any areas that you've never played before?
I'm sorry?
On the current Malmsteen tour, I was wondering if you've hit any spots that you've never played before. As far as
yeah. A lot of places. Like, for example, we played Toronto the other night, and I actually have never been to Canada before.
Wow.
And it might have been the best show in the tour so far, and people were really loud, and the place was packed, and it was great. It's a great night. And I don't know if because we come from America, and and we went to Canada, like they were extra nice there. So.
Wow, that's now. Of course, I got to ask. In light of a recent news events that took place in Boston, were you still in Boston when a terrorist thing happened at the Boston
yes.
Marathon?
Yeah, I was here. I was actually, I was working every second of the day putting this whole tour together, and I was just the tour was the only thing on my mind the whole time. And when this thing happened, it just it took all my attention away. Even though it was just so close to the tour, and I really had a lot of work to do. I mean, when something like this happens, like you really can't focus on anything besides, watching TV and seeing what's happening.
And were you kind of in the heart of it? I mean, like, do you live kind of near where it was, or were you at least a little away from the epicenter?
Yeah, actually, it happened a couple of blocks away from Berkeley College of Music, which is where I went to school and where I teach in the summer. And I live about 10-15 minutes away from there. But about a week later, the whole Boston metro area was under lockdown. So I remember I had to go grab my rig for the tour, and I had to because it didn't even arrive at my house. It was a bunch of speaker cabinets and all that stuff, and I had to go get it. But I woke up in the morning and the whole area was under lockdown, so I couldn't even do it that day. So the whole process was delayed by one day, and it was getting more and more nervous for the tour because my
that's awful. But at least you or none of your loved ones got seriously injured. That's the important thing.
Yeah, I thank God for that. You know.
And so I was curious.
I grew up in Israel, and those things.
So that's what I was going to ask you.
Happen every day.
Yeah.
But for that to happen in Boston is just ridiculous. I never saw it coming.
I mean, you always think it's going to happen somewhere else, and like I said, luckily you're all right. I was curious. Like you said, you're originally from Israel, so did you come out here by yourself? Obviously, you're with your sisters, but like, did the rest of the family stay behind?
No, most of my family is here. Just have a brother who stayed in Israel.
Okay, and on that note, I'd like to ask, do you ever have any dream of like going back to to your homeland and like performing there? Like in a big type rock show.
Oh, absolutely. I pretty much had it in a way just 2 nights ago when the Tour came to Boston, and because I do feel like Boston is my home now, and having my family and my close friends being there and all my Berkeley buddies, and was incredible. But yeah, I still feel like I need to come to Israel on a big tour and play a huge place. I definitely need to do that one day.
And I got to say, you speak pretty good English. I was curious, did you learn English at an early age? Did they make you learn in school back there? Because you speak really good. You got a slight accent, but it's just very slight.
Well, thank you. I actually, believe it or not, I started learning English when I learned it in school, but that didn't really do much. But when I was 13 years old, I got cable TV, and I started watching professional wrestling, and that's how I learned English. Honest to God, that's how I learned English.
Well, hey, it did the trick. It seemed to work. And and again, Ethon, it's been great talking to you. And, I'm going to come check out your show. You got coming up, I think it's May 9th in Anaheim, California. Cause that's not too far.
Oh, you're going to be at the Anaheim show.
Yeah, so I'll try to come up and say hi. But but last thing I wanted to ask you about, we were talking a little bit about you did a video a couple years back with George Lynch. I was curious, how did you hook up with George and get him to be in your video?
That's actually a really long story.
Okay, well.
The short version of it is a little bit less than a year ago. I opened for Lynch Mob with my band Burning Heat.
Okay.
And that was like around here in Rhode Island. And I've known George for a few years. So he actually happened to have a couple of days off right after that show, which was a perfect opportunity for us to go and shoot that video. So yeah, he helped me a lot with that, and I'm very grateful for that.
Well,
he's a great guy, and he's one of my biggest influences.
And let me tell you, since you're probably a George Lynch fan yourself, and you've opened for him, I don't know if you're aware, but Lynch Mob, they just put out a great unplugged CD. It's only like 4 tracks, but it's like really great because not only if you're a George Lynch fan, but it's got a real like bluesy feel, unplugged feel to it. And I mean, if you've heard these songs before, it almost gives new life to these songs, and it's worth checking out, even though it's only 4 tracks. So I suggest, if you get a chance to do that, check that out. And last thing I want to ask you is on the new album that you're selling at the shows, I understand you have a couple special guests on that as well. Is that correct?
On the new album, I have Dave Ellison from Megadeth playing on a couple of tracks. And this time I really tried to focus on production a lot more than anything else. And I had this guy, Max Norman, who produced Ozzy's first 3 records.
Oh, wow.
The classic records
Wow.
with Randy Rhoads and with J.Q. Lee. And he also did all the classic Megadeth records.
Okay.
He mixed the record, and we went to a great studio in Stamford, Connecticut called Carriage House, and we mixed the whole thing on a 48-channel SSL board. And actually, I saw Max again last night at the New York show on the tour he came out. And yeah, it ended up being great. And I'm really happy about it because he came out of retirement to do this record. Because he retired from the music business like 20 years ago.
Wow.
And I managed to talk him into mixing this record, and he took it very seriously. He didn't for him it wasn't just like another project or whatever. It's not like he's doing like 75 of them a month. It's just like he hasn't been in the business for almost 20 years, and he came back and took it very seriously, and the results are. I'm very pleased with the results. And then the two of us went up to Portland, Maine, and we used the best mastering engineer of all times, Bob Ludwig, and he mastered the record, and it just came out phenomenal. So I'm very happy about that.
Wow. So of course, I'm aware of Max Norman. Like you said, he worked with Fozzy and Megadeth and a lot of other great people over the years. But I'm not aware that he's done like a guitar type album like this before. So I think that's great. But he worked with you. And what do you think he brought to the project, or what did he? I mean, did you think he had a major role in really how the album came out?
I think so. Yeah, because the mixing process just is such an important part of recording an album. It's one of the stages that can really make it or break it. I mean, I look at it as like a 4-stage process where you have the writing process, and you have the tracking process of just recording everything, and then you have mixing, and then you have mastering. And every stage has to be really, really good, because if you don't do something right, the whole thing is just not going to work. Any stage can really mess up everything. So mixing it's a really important part, and I think he did a phenomenal job. I mean, I'm a big fan of his production abilities. If you listen to Euthanasia, Megadeth, or if you listen to Lynch Moth's Wicked Sensation, these are ridiculously good sounding records. So, especially the way that he mixes drums, he mixes sounds so crystal clear and so huge. It's amazing.
And talking a little bit about the work he did, like on Euthanasia, I was curious. Were you ever much of a fan of Marty Friedman's?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially Marty Friedman's first solo record, Dragon's Kiss, is, I believe, one of the greatest instrumental albums of all time.
And let me ask you, being a guitar player and being that you put out instrumental music, what do you think it takes to put out a really great instrumental album? Because to me, there are guys that they're trying to show off how fast they can play and everything sounds the same. But then there are guys like you that every song sounds different and kind of stands out on its own.
Exactly. Yeah, I was just gonna get into it, because with instrumental music, it's really, really easy to have someone bored out of their mind. Because people usually tend to listen to vocal music and songs that repeat themselves and have lyrics, and they can just focus on that. With instrumental music, it can get complicated, and it can get just like too much, and after a while everything starts sounding the same. So it's really important to have tunes that are very different from each other. So like the way that you the key of the song and the groove of the song and the speed of the song, and just like the type of style that you really write the song in, and the different sections of the songs. You don't want to have exactly the same formula for each song. But typically I would look at an instrumental as a song that would normally have an intro and a verse and a pre-chorus and a chorus and a solo and maybe a bridge. But you can't just be locked to just like one formula and write all your songs exactly the same. But if you do think about it in terms of, writing a song, then it's not just a one never-ending solo. It's just like you have a melody, and then the challenge is if you have a good section, a good melody, then you have to go to a different section. The next section has to still sound like it's the same song, but at the same time it has to have some kind of contrast to what you already have. So that's where music theory comes into play, and that's where the challenge is really is happening. You have to really sit down and you have to give it some time. And sometimes you'll have one great section for 6 months, and you won't know what to do with the rest of it. And then you just you can't really force it. You just have to wait, and all of a sudden one day something comes along, and the tune is finished.
And,
it's a long process.
And let me ask you, when you're working with music where you're writing lyrics and stuff, it's easy in the form that, like when you write the lyrics, if it's a love ballad, if it's a heavy rock tune, and then you can kind of come up with the music around what type of song it is. Whereas when you're doing instrumental music, I would imagine it's more about the emotion. I mean, I imagine a lot of times you can just plug in your guitar and just kind of start wailing away and kind of see what, there's a little more freedom in seeing what comes up and having to, this is a ballad, so I have to have music's kind of slower. There's a little more freedom.
I mean, it's true. There are a lot of writing techniques, so it's not one way. You can start a song by just getting a certain groove, a drum groove, and then work from there. For me personally, I didn't even really mean to do a second instrumental album, but when you when you just mess around with the guitar, sometimes things come up, and then you're like, oh, that sounded kind of cool.
Yeah.
And you have one section for a while, and then 2 or 3 years later, you're like, you know what, that could work with that song, so this would be another section. So now I just gotta have to come up with the rest and finish this tune, and you got a whole tune. And so a lot of the things that I do come from just a student would teach me or something, and I would just be there, waiting for the next student and just mess around with the guitar, and some ideas would come out, and at the end, I'll just work them up to a full-blown tune.
Okay, and on your new album that you're selling at the show, I was curious, when you went in to record it, did you have extra tunes left over, or do you pretty much just record what you write specifically for the album, or do you have a lot of stuff usually left over?
I usually don't have a lot of leftovers.
Okay.
Especially coming up with 10, 12, 13 songs, you just take all your ideas, and then you just try to finish those ideas into making them real songs. Because a lot of times, sometimes I'll have some ideas that are leftovers, not complete tunes, some idea that I could never really fully develop into a full tune, and it might wait for the next record. But I usually try to take advantage of all my ideas.
Okay, the next...
The thing I hate the most is a wasted idea. If you have a great idea and you just kind of forgot about it altogether, and, that's a bad feeling.
Okay, and the next thing I want to ask you about real quick is... Now there, I like guitar players, obviously that can shred like that and stuff, and there's a time and place for that. But and then you got guys that are really on the technical side of the playing, which is, that sounded great, but it's not I'm not playing it technically precise. I mean, what do you think it's necessarily as important about what is technically precise or what fits the song?
Can you repeat the last part of the
Well, for example, there are guys that are real technical players, and they might play a tune and be, that's a real cool sounding tune, but I'm not playing the song real technically precise. Do you think technique's necessarily as important as what feels right for a song?
So you're asking if technique is really important for the song?
Yeah, I mean, let's say you're playing a song. Let's say you you go in there and you're playing a little differently than what it was written. Oh, hey, that I didn't write it that way, but that sounds cool. There's some guys that are like, oh, I hit the wrong key. That sounded cool, but I'm not playing it technically precise, and they're all into the technique as opposed to, what sounds good for the song or what fits the song.
Yeah, that's a problem that a lot of shredders have out there, where it's all about playing fast or whatever, or like overplaying. There are a lot of players who overplay, and that's and a lot of those players don't even get really far.
Yeah.
Because whenever they hook up with with a major band or a really good songwriter or whatever, like it just doesn't work.
See, and I think that's a great thing about guys like you and Inkfe is that you put out great music on, and you guys are pretty you're great guitar players, but at the same time you put on a great show. You're not necessarily thinking about I got to hit that A chord or whatever, but you put on a great show. It's about rocking out, and it's about going with the feeling, and of course being on the Inkfe tour. I was curious. Have you had a chance to read his autobiography? It came out a few weeks ago.
I didn't even know that it actually came out already.
Yeah, yeah, because I heard it.
Yeah, no, I didn't get a chance. I've been so busy. With
of course, yeah.
It should be very interesting.
Well, you get a chance maybe when you're off tour, and then that's the last thing. Of course, you're touring. Your soul band's currently on the tour, and then Burning Heat band's going to take over. And then I was curious. After that, do you get back into teaching, or is there any chance of any Ethon Brosh solo dates, like headlining dates?
I would like to. I mean, I'm not sure when it will happen, but I know that it will at some point.
Okay.
It all depends on technicalities and venues and booking agents and things like that. But this is something that, especially now that I'm seeing how good of the reaction is when I'm opening for Ethon, I'm like, I have to continue doing this and actually have my instrumental band in front of all these people. It's it's so great. So great to have I'm playing in front of really packed places and people are loving it, and I couldn't have asked for a better reaction. So I need to figure out a way to actually headline myself and get people to come out and and see those shows. So it's just a matter of time. Everything is a work in progress.
Okay.
There's so many things to actually have happen.
And I know you're very busy, so I'm going to let you go. Last question I had was, we were talking a little bit about doing guitar clinics. I was curious, is that something you've actually done, or is that something you plan to do in the future?
I've done a little bit of that, and I'd like to do that in the future. Anything that has to do with guitar playing, just sitting in front of an audience, or preferably standing in front of an audience. Anything like that where you're in front of people and just play guitar, it's exactly what I want to do.
Okay, and
I mean, it's what I'm doing, but I want to do it all the time.
Well, hopefully this tour is going to be great exposure for you, and like I said, I'm going to come and see Van Nuys show, so I'll be sure to come and try to say hello when I'm there.
Absolutely.
And hopefully I'll get a chance to get the album.